Our agenda for tonight will let you know why you're here. At our meeting in December, we held 3 different listening sessions, and people provided feedback. They actually voted while they were there, and if you weren't there, I'll go through the results of that listening session so you can kind of get a feel for how we got to the design point that we have today. As you came in, you had an opportunity to view the visual simulations that we have provided for the different interchanges that we are poised with in our planning study. I want to talk a little bit about some policy proposals that we may need to help implement some ideas on this plan, and then discuss the next steps and recommendations. The reason I have you here tonight is I want to give another opportunity for the public to be aware of the project, its goals, and why you're here. Again, we want your feedback. When you signed in tonight, hopefully you grabbed a green comment form sheet from the back. And this has some questions that we'd like you to give a thoughtful and honest response to. If there's things that we haven't thought about or questions that you have, feel free to write them on here. If you think we did an awful job, feel free to write that on there. I hope you don't, but really your comments here do help influence the folks who have been working on this plan, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback through the written word. And then I just want you to be aware of the next steps as we conclude the project. So our project purpose, really we were tasked with determining aesthetics, the way things look visually. We're evaluating them from a structural and a landscape standpoint. There are 6 different interchanges and overpasses that we are reviewing, starting at the south at Hat 6 Road, and working our way up to north of Bar None with the future West Wind Road underpass that will be an interchange coming in the near future. And so we've gone through, Gordon and I have been here a couple of times to the community. We've done several drive-thrus in the corridor. We spent time on foot in the corridor. We've observed traffic patterns. We've actually been here in several different weather conditions, which has been kind of helpful. And really trying to get a feel for on the ground. The other thing that we have too is a technical advisory committee consisting of folks from the different city, county agencies, state agencies. Federal Highway Administration is on our board, folks from the chamber and visitors. So those folks have been reviewing our draft plans and providing us feedback throughout the process. So as Andrew mentioned, the goal here is to produce a policy document. What happens when a state agency such as the Wyoming Department of Transportation proposes a project, if the community has an adopted document that cites their wishes and desires, that gives them further guidance on what they need to do for their project. In absence of such of a document, they just go through with their standard minimums that they have to meet for their funding and safety criteria. So by having a policy document like this, it kind of holds them a little bit to a higher standard. It also helps them achieve a greater vision for what the community wants, and it helps them integrate their ideas into the community. This is really a project. The document is an over time document. There's some things that we can do in the near term that we'll talk about, just little things that may make a big difference. But there's some grandiose ideas here that might not take place for 20 or even 50 years. And so it's really something that's going to evolve over time. And then the other goal is just to identify some standards. We're talking about things like maintenance. It's always one thing to get the funding to get something built. It's another to find the funding to maintain the people who have to be out there picking up the litter or repainting an object or anything else that you may need to do. And so we're evaluating all those things as part of this plan. As we discuss the project schedule, we did begin in October. We met with the Technical Advisory Committee to talk about the goals. We had 3 listening sessions. We had a one-on-one meeting with the officials from the Wyoming Department of Transportation. They have the sole authority from the right-of-way of the interstate corridor itself. So whatever we do, propose to do to any of the bridge structures, or the land, or the fencing, and that sort of thing, is the responsibility of the Department of Transportation. We've been working since January to develop design guidelines. We had a draft document that was released in March. We've been continuing refining that document with different ideas from the feedback from our advisory committee. We're here tonight to give you another opportunity to give your thoughts on that. And then by the end of June is our final project wrap-up and deliverables. And then the plan will be run through the appropriate governing agencies. So the thing that we've been working with, as you're aware, in 2015, the Casper brand was released to the community. This was work that was done outside of our contract. We didn't have any influence on that. This project just supports that work that those other folks have been doing. And so it contributes vital information to that. So basically, when we learned about the brand reveal early this year, we read through all the documents, all of the intent and meaning. We've been working with the holders of the brand to kind of talk about how you implement such things. And it's kind of been a real interesting combination. The good news was the ideas that we had come up with up until that point actually ran parallel with the ideas that came out of the branding process. It's really that mix of the urban and natural environments and our materials that we're looking at, dealing with steel, which is a built thing, with landscape, which is natural. And so we've really been able to fulfill the brand promise through these different things. So the brand really came out with this diamond type shape. We are looking at, when you look at the visual simulations, you'll see that a lot of the bottoms of the bridges are blue. Blue is a predominant theme through the brand. The Wyosity, trademark name on that, has its own meaning through there. The one thing we did discuss at today's meeting is that, but you've probably seen this image, it's always kind of got Casper on that. And we were going to discuss on how Bar None or Evansville are going to adopt, modify, or otherwise incorporate that brand through a bigger vision. Because our study, does include the Bar None through Evansville kind of run through the corridor. And so if we're going to kind of adopt these brand strategies, it's important to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So in December, we talked about the visual preference survey. We asked people a lot of questions, color preferences. People really like blue. You guys like blue? I even wore my blue shirt today just to re-emphasize that. So blue is a predominant theme because of the skies. People here really enjoy, have an acute attachment to the North Platte River. And so that just becomes a dominant theme through there. We asked them about landscape types, showed them a whole bunch of different ones. The irony was nobody liked Devil's Tower. But canyons, collecting the viewpoints. If you think about visual preferences, your eye kind of focuses towards the end here, the shimmer off the water, the different textures and shapes through there. And so we have that through the corridor, which is good. Some things like texture, really you're starting to apply things like this to landscaping, to bridges, and things that you can do. Folks really said they really liked the native grass feel to things. They weren't quite as attached to the rocks or a block type thing. Things that were soft and flowing and moving towards that naturalistic landscape. Looking at design in terms of form and balance. Really like the informal, strong preference for an informal look. Things are kind of juxtaposed within the landscape. That works out really nice because as you go through the corridor, it's not just a standard straight corridor. You're going over bridges, you're swinging back, there's S-curves, there's in and out, leave lanes. And so that really does work well for us. So it's good that your preferences match what we needed to do. We got a little bit into different highway wall types. We had thought there'd be a lot of opportunity, maybe start incorporating sound walls through the corridor. Unfortunately, as we started to look, there's such a limited right-of-way for that. It's really kind of difficult to do. But we're able to take these preferences that we had, kind of a natural look, and as the Department of Transportation slowly starts to replace the bridges throughout the corridor, we can apply these textures to the things like the piers that are holding the bridge structures up. If they do the supports across the bottom, the horizontal ones, they can use a concrete form liner. And so those are all generally available. We looked at different ideas. You know, we can do the form liner up in the left-hand corner, stacked blocks down on the bottom. People really, again, the strong preference for the natural stacked blocks in the landscape. We were talking about different highway overpasses, how they may look. A lot of people really enjoyed this one. It's fairly a dynamic bridge. It's got different arch-shaped girders through the bottom. You've got ornamentation through piers. You've got a nice decorative railing. Although it's kind of a monochromatic image, people felt like that was the one that they could relate the most to. We thought this one was interesting. You know, it's got a blue pedestrian rail fence with fish on it, actually. And the tough part about the blue is that blue tends to fade out into the landscape. And so we kind of had to figure out how we're going to deal with that in terms of our keeping up to our brand promise. Guardrails and barriers, there's several different ways that you can approach these. Rock, logs, metal, concrete blocks. Didn't really like the log and beam type thing. Pretty split preferences on those different ones. Again, looking at the different noise barriers. The form liner people thought was really neat. We thought these are great opportunities to incorporate a theme or identify a particular area throughout the corridor. And if there is some sort of opportunity for a structural wall, this could easily be integrated into it for a very low cost. Folks also we talked a lot about underpasses. And you can see in one of the visual simulations in the back, it printed out a little bit darker than probably what it needed to be. But essentially we were trying to capture these looks where you could use LED lighting to give some interest to an otherwise dark and dismal underpass. You can actually do, you can see the one on the bottom has some artwork in it. With LED lighting, you can change the color light. It can be blue, it can go blue to purple to pink. It can really make these some nice dynamic spaces. We also looked at some non-traditional uses of underpasses, and people all thought that those are all generally good ideas with the exception of placing the playground underneath. But community gardens, opportunities for public art, tiles, and things like that are really popular in other communities. Through our listening sessions, we did get in touch with some local artists who would be interested in supporting the city on any decorative art projects that they may have. We're looking at the different types of walls again. People thought this one was really interesting. Again, it's another dynamic image. It's got a lot of different things going on, different textures. There's a little symmetry to it, which holds consistent to the other views that we had throughout the corridor. Landscaping, you know, they said don't go overboard with the landscaping, keep it pretty minimal. And then we took a look at some different ideas for the roundabouts, seeing everything from landscaping to public art to very minimal type of monumentation. Folks kind of like the nice different colored positions, the orange and the blue, the landscape, and again the grass is really, I think, added to that. And then we looked at entryways into the community. The one thing that we learned really quickly was, between the right-of-way and the interstate corridor, there's not a whole lot you can do to identify community identity. It's really going to be that extra 50 to 500 feet beyond those entry points that really help to establish that. And so people responded really well to the planted medians in the middle of the roads as you come back into town. They thought that was a nice welcoming feeling, and that came in loud and clear. So what we did at that point is we came back to our office and started playing with some different ideas of what we could do. And this is West Wardwell, right? Yep. So this is looking from the west or the east towards the west. This interchange obviously does not exist right now. This is actually a roundabout from Ohio or somewhere, I think.
He was like a mashup of the actual.
But really it was to truly just give an idea of what we can do. What does the space look like if you put a roundabout at the end of an interchange? And what does that mean for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other folks in here? Well, first of all, it means that bicyclists can levitate. Yeah. No, but really, you know, it does show an opportunity without a whole lot of fanfare to really enhance the gateway into the community. You know, you only need to plant, you know, a half dozen trees, maybe do a little berming, add some, you know, lawn to the area, and it really can add some more to it. In this particular one, we took the Wyocity brand from Casper. We changed the words up here from Casper to bar none. Kind of just took a little artistic liberty on that. And, you know, just a few banners, added some decorative light poles. It can really, you know, some little small changes can take you a long ways for that. This is the west wing. Yep. And just, this will be a road that will be improved. At this time, the Department of Transportation doesn't really plan on doing much with this, right?
The bridge structures would remain the same as they are.
Yeah. But we said, what happens if you ever have that opportunity to widen that bridge structure? And so we just showed what that would look like, you know, adding a boulevard sidewalk, a couple of trees, and then just getting the native grasses to grow back up there. Again, we painted the girders on the bridge structures blue, added kind of a decorative railing through there, and I think it just kind of enhances to it. The one thing that we figured that once you add an interchange to this one, you're probably more than likely going to have a Flying J or some other truck stop going in on that other side. And with the development of bar none expanding to the north, you know, there's not people walking up there right now for a destination, but you add an interchange and we add the expansion of the homes, it's fairly likely that you can attract that type of traffic. And so we just kind of wanted to see what that would look like. You know, we put some texture on the abutments for the bridge supports, and I think it just adds to that community character. This is at the Shoshone interchange as you head south. This is a project that is designed and currently under construction. We did have a sign that was designed as part of the project 2 years ago. Basically, once the brand was released, it was requested that we change the sign face to reflect that, and so we spent considerable time doing that. And you can kind of see this is what it'll look like as you're going into the beds. Some trees planted in the back with the sign perched up and a landscape bed off to the side. And so that's kind of, as you come off the Shoshone interchange heading to the south, this is the sign that will greet you, and also for traffic on I-25 coming into Casper. So this one is one that you will see probably in the next year.
Is that sign going to be reflective?
No.
Paint?
No.
It isn't sold?
No. But there is lights that will shine on that image. Yes. This one is Poplar Street. We had a lot of fun with this one. There are a lot of things we heard that, while those of you who live here know that the North Platte River runs through town, that it's a gem and it's something that should be treasured, there's not a lot of people who drive through Casper that know that you have a blue ribbon trout stream that runs through your community. And we thought at Poplar Street, with its adjacency to the river, this would be a good way to start celebrating these particular themes. And so, again, you kind of see the blue girders on the bottom of the bridge structure. The vector art with the fly fishermen and the fish, you know, could be anything like a laser cut panel that can be an applique that could be applied to the bridge structure. That makes something very easy. That way, if something got wrecked, it can come back off, be fixed, and be placed back up there. And then we just, you know, did some decorative ornamentation on the piers of the bridges that could apply through in there. Add a little, clean up the landscaping. You can actually paint. There's a lot of things we can do now with digital painting, type wallpaper stuff, actual paint on the walls, to really reflect that theme for the community. And so when we were doing these simulations, you know, Gordon and I just kind of picked some themes that we thought would be kind of cool. Some might be kind of racy for the community, but really that might be something as part of an ongoing effort beyond this project, you know, that you have a group that identifies what those themes are common to the community. This is Center Street. This is just an idea where we applied, some LED lighting types that may make things a little bit more interesting throughout there. You have good approaches as you come into downtown. We feel like those are functioning really well at this point, and that might just be something that adds and gets people off the interstate. This is the East Yellowstone Bridge. Again, we just kind of started to apply the same type of materials. So you're starting to see that repeat of materials, the blue girders, some sort of pier ornamentation to kind of anchor the ends of these. The decorative handrails, in this case, we started to powder coat them in a blue color, and then just started to improve the grasses off to the side and added some trees up on the top where we felt like we can get some decent maintenance to that. Now the fun part is the grasses will probably only be this green about this time of year, about 3 weeks. But, if there's a way that we can formulate the grass plantings to get them a little bit taller and kind of get that texture that people wanted, it may not matter that they're not green. If you can get, color doesn't matter, maybe we can do something with texture. If texture doesn't work, then you can work to ornamentation. But those are really easy things that we can try to implement into the landscape, the low-hanging fruit, if you will. This is the one where we kind of took some artistic liberties. Actually, federal highways has no requirement that the crosswalks actually have to be the rectangular crosswalks through there.
Actually, that one's an existing, I stole that from an existing crosswalk.
Do you remember where it was?
I'd like to say it was in New Jersey somewhere.
Yeah. And so let's just say you're going into the music district. You can pick any theme you really want to, and you can apply that to the crosswalk. We took the columns, we put some artistic impressions on the columns, and then on the bridge abutments as you're going underneath. And as you start to repeat those materials as you're moving down that corridor, it kind of keeps the theme going consistently, but it really adds each distinct district as you move through that. And it's our understanding, reading through your comprehensive plan and the branding thing, that while you all have this common identity, you also value your diversity. And so you want that opportunity to celebrate the diversity as well. This one we left in place kind of the existing landscaping through the corridor. And again, it's just kind of another application. We added some decorative lights that could happen on the top through there. Really just cleaning up certain things can really go a long ways to achieving your goals. This is Wyoming Boulevard. We took a little more direct application of the brand, the Wyocity brand, and applied it directly to the bridge. This is a road that's extremely wide right now, and there's really no reason that you couldn't add a painted bike lane to that to add for more pedestrian traffic. You have the existing walls that are underneath there right now. Just add a little bit of landscaping to that. I think would just give that the extra little touch that it needs, and then get some of those trees growing off of that area. Let's see, this is Blackmore Road.
Yep.
So this is another thing that we played with, kind of the cowboy theme, the horses and things like that. What we do doesn't have to be extremely elaborate. Again, these are just kind of applique things that you can add to the bridge. And we went that way because there's no long-term plans to replace a lot of these bridges. So how do you enhance them with what you have? We really feel like that was probably the easiest way to do that. Excuse me, can I ask a question?
I was looking at that, and I've ridden my bike underneath there, and it looks to me like if you're going to put that sidewalk in, it looks like you're going to have to move those girders over farther, unless you make the road narrow.
Yeah, you could certainly, make the road a little bit narrower. Probably moving the piers probably wouldn't happen. What may happen, though, is that you could take this sidewalk and come along the back side and then put more of a straight retaining wall in here, so you could actually go around those piers and then come back out to the road right away.
Okay, but you right now, as far as, that putting that in that way, you don't have the intention to move the girders.
No.
Okay.
So this would be another example as you come into Casper. Again, if you wanted to repeat the sign that you have at the Shoshone interchange, again, you can place that into the landscape. adding the pedestrian lights on the top of the railing. As you can start to see the theme here, you're just kind of starting to repeat those materials as you're going through the corridor. Some things we talked about, they said, what's the one thing that people really have an angst about? And we said it's these medians in between your on-ramps and the service roads. People really said they had an angst about the woven wire fence that's in between there. And then it's always it collects all the sand and the gravels and all that sort of thing from the snow removal activities, and the grass doesn't grow. And so, an idea is try to get that grass reestablished. We can use some colored concrete to provide some structural integrity to it. And then at today's meeting, we discussed the opportunity for maybe doing some pilot studies on the use of synthetic grass. If we can't get real grass to grow there because of the salt environment and that sort of thing, they've come a long ways. Not the AstroTurf you buy at Menards, but synthetic grass that they're manufacturing these days allows for water to drain through it. It might be a good thing to test to see if that would actually work in our highway corridor. And then, well, is there any questions?
How much did you guys make for this presentation?
How much?
How much are you paid for this presentation, and who paid it? Whether it was county commissioners or city council or?
The entire project was a contract for $50,000, paid for through 90% through the federal government and about 10% through local funds from all of the member agencies.
Which are?
Casper, Natrona County, Mills, Evansville, bar none.
Thank you.
I would just like to make a comment. I would like to see casper. I know this is a freeway project, but even underpass, like I said, I take occasionally I take Blackmore underpass, and it's our city is not other than the Platte River Parkway is not a bike friendly city really at all. And I personally would like to see it looks wonderful with your bike lanes there and all, but it doesn't show all the traffic. More than likely, unless things get widened up a bit, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
So, to quickly clarify from almost more of a traffic standpoint, that there's just too much, safety standpoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just too congested to have a bike next to it?
Yeah, and like I said, I noticed, the Blackmore underpass, I'm looking at that, and I'm going, the before and the after, and everything looks wonderful. But I'm looking, I'm going, there is not enough room there to have that sidewalk where people walk.
Or the bike lane. We're trucks up and down this highway all day long, every day.
Yeah.
How many people are going to be splattered with something like this?
But I think it makes you start thinking about, well, what could this be? We could have bike lanes. How do we make that work?
I would love to.
So it makes you take the next step. It starts a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
that's
the intent really behind the plan is, again, to kind of give us a toolbox of different themes, different textures, different lighting options, different things that we would like to implement as a community. And whether that's a bike lane at Blackmore or whatnot, it really depends on the funding that's available and whether we have those options available at the time. So.
Sometimes I feel that our city doesn't look ahead far enough, like that Blackmore underpass is so narrow already that didn't they think that someday they might want to have somebody walking underneath there or riding their bike under there? Obviously not. And I could say the same thing for our aquatic center, but I won't get into that. Anyway.
Joey, do you have cost estimates for the proposed changes for the visualizations? You say, to make this happen, $20 million, it's was 18. Or maybe the individual elements, the paint's 18,000, the sculpture's 24,000, something like that.
They're so unique and individual to that. You'd have to actually get to the design engineering phase of it. We weren't working with CAD files or anything like that. Basically just working off of photographs at this type of level of thing. I believe the Shoshone interchange enhancements that you'll be seeing, the sign, associated landscaping and stuff like that. I want to say that was roughly about, I want to say it's about $250,000. So they can add up fairly quickly on that. We talked about potential grant sources at our committee meeting today. You know, I think if you do embrace the opportunity to get creative with some of your themes, there's like the National Endowment for the Arts, you know, those types of grant sources, and Wyoming has a great base of foundations that really support arts and culture in the state. I think you could really tap into those sources if you're showing them that you want to do creative public art strategies within your transportation infrastructure. Yes, ma'am.
You also said that you guys had been around doing this in Casper since October 2014. Well, I just attended Business Alliance on, what was that, May 11th? And that's when they said they were breaking up into committee for this. So either your guys are been around doing this for a long time and this Business Alliance didn't know about it, or somebody got their lines crossed, because I'm getting two different stories. Like, this was just recently brought up, this is just brand new for us to consider and the whole bit, but you're talking, you've already had committee meetings on this, you've already had visiting meetings on this and all of that. But the Business Alliance didn't act like that at all when I sat in on their meeting. They acted like this was the first time this was coming out.
Members of the technical committee for this project include representatives from each government that has property adjacent to the freeway, the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Agency, CADA, was invited. The Convention and Visitors Bureau was a part of it as well. So, you know, I'm not terribly familiar with the...
They were all present at that. I mean, CADA was represented, and God, I don't know, probably 25 developers and 50 real estate people. I didn't see very many landowners that own property along these highways. I saw a lot of the developers and real estate guys, but...
I'm not familiar with the event. I can't speak to it.
So you don't know the Business Alliance? Who they are?
Personally, no.
Thank you.
Sounds like a great group to get involved.
They're the one that supposedly thought of this.
Yeah, and actually to go back to the bike ped thing, you know, that was one question that we kind of dealt with the interchanges at Bar None. I mean, we were talking with the Department of Transportation. You know, they were kind of, their position starting out was, well, there's nobody walking there now. So therefore, we do not need to provide that because there's not a demand for that. And then our approach was, yeah, but you put in that interchange and you get a gas station there and you build the houses out to there. Pretty soon you got the kids walking on the highway to the gas station. And so really, including a lot of this type of things, visual simulations, was really to kind of help them visualize what that would be as well. You know, it's not as big of a deal as they feel like it may be. You know, if you can kind of visualize it, it's a little bit more realistic. You can kind of start to brainstorm ideas on how you might make it work, versus just kind of saying, well, nobody's walking there now, so you know, obviously you don't need a sidewalk. So the effort on the purpose of the plan is to kind of flip that conversation and be like, oh yeah, I saw a picture where they did that bike lane. You know, is that something that we can do? You know, at Wardell Interchange, or you know, that sort of thing. So that was really the intent of a lot of these visual simulations. Like Jared said, to start stimulating that conversation.
Well, there's been scuttlebutt for a long time, and you've probably talked to this, Mr. Pilcher, of a truck stop north of town. I don't know if that's just talk or what.
No, Viaduct's made it impossible.
So it's just scuttlebutt.
They have a pretty much a no, but not only no, but no way attitude.
What interchange is that supposed to be at?
Pardon me?
Where are they going to put this new interchange that they're talking about?
Oh, up on top of the hill with the gravel pit
Oh,
is where they've got the mine now. Because that'll tie the road in out to the rail facility
And
behind
when-
the airport.
that's in the making now, isn't it?
That's correct.
Theoretically someday.
It's scheduled for construction in 2018.
Pardon me?
It's scheduled for construction in 2018.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Has it gone that far
And
along?
the truck stop ain't gonna fly out there, then?
It would have to be permitted, land would have to be purchased, and it would have to be worth someone's while. And remember, YDOT fights progress tooth and nail. I mean, I possess a stack of letters where they fought my projects tooth and nail since 1960. The theory that they're business pros is a false one indeed. It makes for a wonderful presentation, but it's not a based in reality presentation. It's first no, but hell no.
It's not unique to only your,
It should
your
be the other
state.
way. I agree. It should be the other way. But it just isn't.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, with this going on, there's going to come a time where there's going to be code enforcement involved for businesses and private properties that are along these corridors. What do you see going to happen with that? I mean, is people going to suddenly be required to put up fencing and screening to hide, their business equipment, whether it be oil field or propane tanks or whatever? And with that, the reason that these people had bought these properties to begin with was they paid high prices for these properties to be located along these main corridors, not only for advertisement, but also for the room. They paid extra money for this. And if they're going to be, code enforcement's going to suddenly come in and say, we don't like the way your oil field equipment looks from the highway, we're going to want you to screen. Now you're essentially taking these people's rights to be what they were when they bought their properties. It's also known as a grandfathering use. And I spent a lot of money fighting for this in this town, and I'm not going to let this happen to anyone else. This is etched in stone. If somebody's using your land or your business area for what it is, they're not going to be subject to your pretty police. So how do you see dealing with these businesses that are going to be classified as eyesores by our newest plan to beautify our corridors?
Well, I think, you definitely want to, first of all, establish a working relationship with the business owners. It's definitely a partnership. We all know if we come in kind of top-heavy, government top-down, nobody really enjoys that type of a process. And so it really does need to be more of a grassroots coming back up from that. If property owners have a desire to improve their property and there's opportunities and ideas out there, they should have opportunities to resources to fulfill their vision. And as people brought up in the listening sessions, that if they do make the investments in their property, that they shouldn't be penalized for that. And so I think we need to look at creative ways to incentivize businesses to do that. I recently worked with an RV dealership along an interstate corridor in Billings where they bought in the county, and they did just that. They bought interstate frontage because they liked the visibility of it, the access to the land, the right of the entryway into town, and they were kind of surprised at their particular area of the zoning, which they must have figured out after they bought the property, required trees for every 25 foot of right-of-way along that interstate corridor. And they were concerned about that. And of course the reason for that is that we want nice, beautiful green corridors, but at the same time the businesses have a right to, like you mentioned, they paid extra for that frontage property on there and utilize that as an incentive for their business. Working with them, we talked about different ways that code can be interpreted. You don't necessarily need to plant the row of trees in that corridor, but maybe you can cluster them and that you would identify key views so that key signage on the property is still visible and maintained. Interesting building features can be incorporated into their design where they can do that. Or perhaps if they, they separate kind of the landscaping to provide those views, and then they put the landscaping in the back or reshape that around. I think there's ways that you can work with that instead of penalizing that property owner for that.
So you're asking them to spend more money on their property because you don't like the way it looks. Is that correct?
No, not at all. We're saying that working within the existing codes and regulations, that you need to partner with the community to make a win-win for everybody.
Judy, as you well know, when I was on the commission, the way I see it, no one wants to stifle, is that the right word, stifle, any current businesses along the interstate. We want, I would think, the city fathers, county commissioners, and whoever would want to work with them. And, you know, hopefully we can all come to an agreement, like you were saying, to work hand in hand. Because now I wouldn't want to hurt any business along the interstate.
I mean, if you think about it, Terry, a lot of those guys that bought those frontage properties have stuff. Think of the guy with the tanks out there, the one with the oil field equipment coming in from the airport. Hell, there's probably a dozen like that there. I mean, what are we going to suddenly do? Say, look, guys, we don't like the way your stuff looks, so we're going to either ticket you if you don't comply with what we're telling you to do. You're making more lawsuits is what you're doing. When you start messing with people's property, what if they don't want to put slats in their fences and they don't want to put trees up? I mean, then what? You know what I mean? I mean, you can ask people to do things and you can work with them, but by God, you better not try to force them to do it, because you're picking for blood.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's suggesting that at all, honestly. I think we want to be able to work within our community rights of ways and emphasize those things that are within the public domain and get those corridors, the medians looking nice as you come into town. Let's get the wire fences repaired. Let's get the gravel swept up. Let's get the paint done on the bridges. You know, I think those little things will really go a long way to accomplish your goals that you're trying to achieve through this plan. Any other questions? Well, great. I appreciate everybody for coming tonight, and thank you. Please fill out your green forms, and your feedback is important to us, and we look forward to any ideas that you may have. Thank you.
We'll come back to you. Group 3 form. Now, under executive privilege, can you repeat that last observation, please? That might be
our key belief is that you have to have local leaders organized and involved as a local economic engine to make anything happen. Okay. And our observation is that state statute 1660 needs to be revisited. 16.6. Sorry, Mark. 16.6 needs to be revisited.
The state statute 1660 needs to be revisited.
16.6.
And that means what?
That sets the limits on state and local entities as to economic endeavors.
Okay.
There's some restrictions there that need to be looked at.
So if we capture 1660.
That's good.
Training center, college.
Anything else?
The other one was to improve and upgrade Casper's appearance.
So that's under a goal?
Yeah. So we're looking at identifying and remediating objectionable sites, maybe when you're coming in along the gateways or along the interstate, things.
So what would be an example of that that your groups talked about to share with everybody?
Improving the gateways would be helpful. We've got these pretty statues, and then we've got industrial properties with junk piled around them. To maybe go in and clean that up, maybe improve the exits along I-25. They're kind of dumpy. When you have people coming into the community or businesses even looking at relocating here, they take one look at that stretch along the interstate and say, it's not where we want to be.
Now, when you say that, is that anecdotal or is that actually you've had that conversation?
I've had that conversation with a couple businesses, yeah.
That's fine. I just wanted to...
Yeah.
I know of an individual in this town, I won't mention their name, but when they pick up somebody, a client at the airport, and they come in, then they take a right to get across the river that way rather than coming all the way down. Yeah. And so then they go to college and then come back downtown by way of the college.
Yeah, there's a route, yeah.
It's an interesting, circuitous route, but I can understand.
Yeah.
You also said that you guys had been around doing this in Casper since October 2014. Well, I just attended Business Alliance, what was that, May 11th? And that's when they said they were breaking up into committee for this. So either your guys are been around doing this for a long time and this business alliance didn't know about it, or somebody got their lines crossed, because I'm getting two different stories. Like, this was just recently brought up, this is just brand new for us to consider and the whole bit, but you're talking, you've already had committee meetings on this, you've already had visioning meetings on this and all of that. But the Business Alliance didn't act like that at all when I sat in on their meeting. They acted like this was the first time this was coming out.
Members of the technical committee for this project include representatives from each government that has property adjacent to the freeway, the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Agency, CADA, was invited. The Convention and Visitors Bureau was a part of it as well. So, I'm not terribly familiar with
They were all present at that. I mean, CADA was represented, and God, I don't know, probably 25 developers and 50 real estate people. I didn't see very many landowners that own property along these highways. I saw a lot of the developers and real estate guys, but...
I'm not familiar with the event. I can't speak to it.
So you don't know the Business Alliance? Who they are?
Personally, no.
Thank you.
We'll come back to you. 3, 4. Now, I'm going to use executive privilege. Can you repeat that last observation, please? That might become the quote of the day. Groups, go back to your same group. You've got 15 minutes. 15 Rollins. They've got this downtown redone, but there's basically no attractive entrance into the downtown off the interstate. Now, I-80, has a lot of traffic, right? A lot of traffic. There's basically no attention as you're driving across the interstate to come and visit downtown historic Rollins, nor is there a convenient way to get into the downtown. I mean, the one way that you would typically go, you take Gateway Boulevard, exit, which is right by the not Flying V, but whatever the big truck stop is there, and so you get off the interstate, you're going west, take a little zigzag going left, you go about a quarter of a mile, and you see this sign about this big with an arrow that says downtown. That's all it says. It's, really? And then you take a right there, you go down the hill and through a neighborhood that's a little bit on the sketchy side. and there you are. And so the point is, they've got this great downtown, but they're not marketing it beyond. And so this has come up in some other communities, the same issues relating to the Department of Transportation and highway signage and things like that. So we've got to figure out a way to get people off the highways into our downtown. So that came up in Thermopolis, the world's largest hot springs, okay? And you got one little tiny sign showing how to get to the state park. And so if you're coming down the hill from Orleans, you can kind of come along fairly quickly and see the sign. Well, so what? I mean, you don't know that. And then on the hillside there is a thing that says world's largest hot springs or something out of white rock. Some of those have fallen down, so it doesn't really spell it the way it should be spelled. You see, like, hey, dude, let's, okay. So this came out, and it said, well, is that the city and county's responsibility, or is it also the citizens? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, you got this walkway downtown along the river there. Done a good job. And it's not too far to walk from the state park itself to downtown, but there's about a 3-block area that's kind of sketchy, and you know what I'm talking about. But it's okay. You got a Rotary Club here, a Kiwanis Club. You guys know how to drive skids. Just get out there and do it yourself. The city will let you. The city's basically saying they're broke, but you guys can do it on notice. God, that's a novel idea. So the point being is that these goals and these measurable objectives and action items don't have to be 100% driven by government or by somebody else, let somebody else. What about taking control yourself? That'll be that last part exercise of action steps that you can do yourself here in the Trumbull County. But the first thing is identifying the goal or the wish list. You think big, and then, okay, what are some measurables that might make that happen? So are there any questions on that? Okay, now we're going to count off, and we're going to begin with Bill Hooper as one. And that's because it's First Interstate Bank, they're a sponsor of the event. He's on my steering committee as well. And so is Brent Berg on my steering committee, and Hank True. Am I missing anybody else? Not my steering committee. They're on the steering committee while I'm in business land and the employment, but so you get the connect the dots. Okay, so 1, and we're gonna count off Fred to 8 or 9. 6, 7.
Let's do 8 for this one, Bill. Start
8
again.
for this one, okay. 1, 2, 3. Actually,
Go the other way.
Start with 8 and go backwards.
we'll do 8 because that's what we're advocate, frame-wise. Go ahead. One more time?